1 in 4 women in Ireland experience physical and sexual violence by an intimate partner. In the last 32 years, 126 women have been killed by a current or former partner. In fact, the Gardaí state that domestic homicides have outpaced gangland murders by almost 2 to 1 in the last 3 years. The Gardaí are now responding to 500 to 600 domestic abuse calls a week. These statistics are horrific. It is clear that the women of Ireland are being failed. Women and children are being turned away from refuge centres due to a lack of space and a lack of professional support services. Despite this, it would appear that Budget 2020 failed to provide any additional funding for the domestic violence sector. The government must commit to meeting its obligations under the Istanbul Convention. Under this, there should be 472 refuge spaces for victims of domestic violence, yet Ireland only has 141. Less than 30% of the required spaces. 9 counties have no places at all for women seeking refuge. For women to escape, they need somewhere to go. This also does affect men, albeit in a much smaller numbers, but every bit as serious when it happens. Fianna Fáil is also calling on the government to allocate the necessary funding for the establishment of a dedicated family law court as a matter of urgency. The conditions within family law and childcare cases are currently being heard are totally unsuitable. I practiced family law as a barrister for about 7 years, and I experienced the lack of privacy and the lack of dignity in a lot of our family law courts across Ireland when it came to people looking for justice and looking for help, looking for support. I do commend the government for bringing in the Domestic Violence Act of 2018. I think that was a very important step. In terms of mental health, we know that domestic violence affects people very seriously. People who suffered domestic violence are more likely to suffer from mental illness, depression and anxiety. And this may be obvious, but it's very important because we know psychological violence by abusers is also very real and very serious. They know what buttons to push. Also, mental illness and mental effects are an important part of being addressed in terms of recovery. I attended only very recently the Wexford Women's Refuge launch of their exhibition for the 16 days of action opposing violence against women. And it was a very, very powerful exhibition. I think probably the most powerful exhibit was the plastic shopping bag with only a small few items of clothing. And I think it reminds us that when people are fleeing domestic violence, it is very often they have to flee with no notice at the first available opportunity. They leave with almost nothing. Other exhibits were the broken phones with messages of hate and control on them, smashed car window, and one particular message which read that the real monsters never lived under my bed. They held me close and told me they love me. And that was a very, very powerful message. And I'd like to compliment Pauline Ennis and her team and all of the people who work and support and contribute to the Wexford Women's Refuge down in Wexford Town. They do phenomenal work down there and deserve as much support as possible. I'd like to address just one point. Deputy Kenny brought up a very important point in terms of the admissibility of evidence. And I argued, as someone who also practiced criminal law and civil law, I argued this point before judges in my time, and I've seen it being argued. And I think there is amount of confusion in our courts over the admissibility of a criminal conviction in a civil court. But can I say that I understood that the Catherine Nevin case held by the Supreme Court, judgment in February of 2019 this year, so it's a recent judgment, and I think lay litigants would not be aware of it. Many people in family law cases are lay litigants and wouldn't be aware and work their way around criminal and civil procedure. But the then President of the High Court, Nicholas Kearns, had a number of years ago found that a criminal conviction was admissible in the case of the Catherine Nevin matter, where the case was brought to disinherit Catherine Nevin. The President Nicholas Kearns' decision was upheld by the Court of Appeal, and in February 2019, the Supreme Court, in a judgment by Justice Isolde O'Malley, upheld that appeal as well, that a criminal conviction is admissible in a civil case as prima facie evidence of what that conviction is for. And that decision was on the 27th of February 2019, and I give the date just so if people need to use it. It is always, also, I suppose, a matter for the judge to make the decision whether they're going to admit that as evidence or not. But I think it's important that that is out there. And I do thank Deputy Kenny for bringing up that point, because it is a very important point and it's something I had forgotten about but does arise on a regular basis.